In a large hall, Fred climbs the steps during the coming-of-age ceremony. On that day, people celebrate their first real birthday, and we see some people really happy, while others seem dejected. Flat is waiting to hear what ability he will get from the gods. Then we see her facial reaction showing fear and sadness upon hearing the news. Inside a mine, two miners decide to take a short break. Will protests, saying they've only been working for 3 hours, but his partner says he's fine. They sit down to eat some food, and Will asks how old Chrissy is. Her partner holds her locket, and opens it, revealing a photo of a cute little girl, who will turn 5 next month. Her birthday is coming up soon, but her dad has no idea what to get her. Will says then they should work hard so they can get him whatever he wants. However, some kobold monsters have seen the two workers. Will's partner warns him to look behind him, and uses his axe to block the monster's attack. He yells at Will to run away, but he doesn't realize that another kobold is jumping at him from behind. Will watches in terror as his friend is torn apart by the wild beast. Then she turns her eyes to him and jumps on him. However, Will is saved by a fiery explosion that kills the monster before it can damage him. The Mages Guild has arrived and aim for the 8 kobolds. Oven orders his units to prepare for battle and not to let any escape. The support team casts a light spell to increase their skill, while the attack team keeps firing. The medical team, meanwhile, checks on the victims. However, one of the kobolds is still alive and tries to attack Malcolm, who panics. Fred runs to the rescue and invokes the arm of the flame god to destroy his enemies with fire. He throws a fireball, which hits the monster, killing him. Then he runs to his friend. Malcolm apologizes, but Fred says there's nothing to worry about. Malcolm asks how his friend can fight so bravely when they are almost the same age. Fred replies that the only thing he is proud of is his magic, and that he fights to get stronger so that everyone will recognize him. Malcolm's brother, Leo, then arrives and checks on his brother. Fred watches and then starts thinking about the skills. These are special abilities granted by the gods to young people who come of age. He is looking forward to next month's coming-of-age ceremony, where he believes he will get the strongest skill. His thoughts are interrupted by Oven, who tells the Mages Guild to get together. A man calling himself Grim is arguing with a woman in the city. He asks some of them to check it, while the rest will continue cleaning the mine. Leo was instructed that he will lead the group that was heading to the city, and takes Fred and Malcolm with him. Sometime later in the village, Green is furious that the girl dares to refuse his invitation. She tells him to stop and asks him what's wrong. However, he grabs her by the arm, and she screams at him to let her go. Then he hears a voice telling him to stop. It is from Fred, who orders him to release the woman. Grime turns his attention to the young man and mocks him for trying to be a hero. He then advances and attacks Fred for daring to interfere. Fred confronts Grime. Leo arrives and can't believe Fred got ahead of them. Malcolm runs to the girl to make sure she's okay. Then he looks at his friend, his face full of worry. Fred tries to cast a spell, but his chanting is interrupted by his opponent's punch. He backs away, looking frustrated, as he is not getting a chance to complete the spell. Leo says that magic is just an imitation of skills. Man-made magic is no match for the miracles bestowed by the gods. He tells the young man to watch carefully, as he will stop Grime's sword with his skill. He adds that Frat will know what to do. Leo then goes to confront Grime, while Frat gets into position. He tells the ruffian that he was probably using a skill. Grime confirms it and Leo replies that he's not ashamed to pick on a kid who doesn't even have a skill yet. Grime mocks the court magician's guilt for babysitting. Then he raises his sword and prepares to strike his enemy. Leo closes his eyes and then opens them, activating his radiant arrow skill. Grime is surprised when multiple arrows of light appear around Leo. They all go off at the same time, and many of them hit their intended target, injuring it. Leo says it's a shower of arrowheads shot at the literal speed of light, making them impossible to avoid. Fred is shocked to see why magic can't compete with abilities. He reminds himself that he shouldn't just be amazed, and starts casting his flame spell now that the enemy has stopped moving. He concentrates the flow of magic in his palm. This time, he can complete his chant. He throws the fireball, and throws it at his enemy, hitting Grime from behind. This is enough to end the fight. While he is being restrained and escorted by other members of the Mages Guild, Oven arrives and tells Fred that what he did was not wrong. He says that he took care of the monsters of the mind and hurried to the village. Fred says that he was able to win thanks to Leo, and that his magic was completely useless against Grime. Oven says you shouldn't compare the magic that anyone can learn to the skills that are given by heaven. She also reminds us that she will have her coming-of-age ceremony in a month. He hopes that Fred will receive a good skill. Fred can hardly wait. He raises his fist and promises to get an impressive skill like Leo's. It's a beautiful sunny day when Frat wakes up. She stretches a little, then makes some tea. He makes his way to the table, but notices that Malcolm is still in bed, and looks a little sad. He asks what's wrong, and then offers his friends some tea. Malcolm perks up, and says he'll have some. Later, many citizens are talking about the street, since it is the day of the coming-of-age ceremony. Some friends greet each other, and share that they were so nervous that they couldn't sleep. In front of them are the members of the Magicians Guild. Malcolm is worried that they might get a useless skill. Fred tries to cheer up his friend, saying that they will surely be the best mages in the Court Mage Guild. Malcolm smiles a little. Others mention that Fred is such a talented magician, so he is confident. Some members then call Leo, but he looks serious and does not answer. It turns out that he is also worried about his brother Malkin. Soon they arrive inside the chapel, where a priest announces that the ceremony will begin now. He instructs the candidates to come to the altar when his name is called. Then he mentions numerous names. Malcolm looks quite tense and is visibly sweating. Fred, however, remains calm and confident. Finally, Malcolm is called and walks slowly down the aisle. He closes his eyes as the priest declares that the ability bestowed upon him is lightning. It is an extremely powerful ability that allows the user to fire a giant lightning spear. Malcolm is teary with relief as the entire crowd erupts in praise. He has obtained the best skill of the day so far. His friends in the guild hug him and congratulate him as Fred gives him the thumbs up. The priest tells everyone to shut up as the ceremony is not over yet. Fred is called last, and everyone's attention is now turned to him. He walks to the altar while waiting for the priest to announce his ability. However, his expression turns to surprise when he hears that his skill is the key to life. Control. No one in the crowd has any idea what that is. Oven then asks the priest what rank the control key's ability is. The priest says it is unknown, but theorizes that it is probably so weak that it will not fit under any of the letter ranges. Oven is devastated, and then tells everyone that he didn't expect an incompetent to come from his esteemed wizard guild. Others start talking, saying that they were against admitting a child who had not yet gone through the ceremony. No matter how good he is at magic, he is useless against skills. Oven looks at his fellow magicians and says that keeping an incompetent one around will be even more problematic. Fred runs to Oven in shock at what is happening. Malcolm tries to run next to his friend, but his brother Leo stops him. Oven then strips Fred of his position. The young man is now crying, while the leader calls him a crow. Green that should now be starting from scratch. Fred then falls to his knees in a sign of pain, while Oven has his back to the young man. Fred packs all his things in his dorm room, and leaves his coat next to a bucket before he leaves. 6 years ago, Fred was living with Nostal's noble family in their mansion, far from the city. One day, as a child, he was watching his half-brothers riding their horses in the yard. He asks his father if he can also ride a horse. Horse. The father doesn't even look at him as he tells him that he has no use for horses and just needs to go back to his room afterwards. Of his food. The boy asks why he can't ride a horse when his siblings are free to do so, but the father doesn't mind discussing it, and simply replies that he should go to his room. He gives up, and is about to head to his room with his head down. One of his older brothers calls him, and invites him to ride a horse with them. Fred is so excited that he leaves with him without question. They go to the stable where Fred's other half-brothers are. They show him a black horse. They say they have prepared it for him. They play the role of supportive brothers, teaching him that the way to ride him is so that he turns around from the back and touches the horse from behind. The three brothers smile as they anticipate what the horse will do. As instructed, the boy gets behind the horse and touches him from behind. The horse gets scared and goes crazy. Just seeing Fred fooled and scared makes the three brothers laugh. Fred's mom sees what the three of them are doing and runs for her son. Later, mother and son go to the park, where the woman tells Fred that his brothers are mean to him because he has their common blood, and they cannot accept them into the family. Seeing her son sad, she tells him that she will teach him magic. The mother chants an incantation that results in a fireball on her palm. The boy's face lights up at his mother's amazing skill. She explains that she learned magic when she was young, and she can teach him to as long as he keeps his lessons a secret. The child puts his hand to the flame and feels its warmth. Sometime later, he is proud to be able to do it himself. Suddenly, Cho the maid bursts into her room to tell her that something happened to her mother. Later, the boy holds his mother's hand while she lies weakly on her bed. He gladly tells her that she can now use 6 spells. The mother says she is glad to hear it, and then closes her eyes for her eternal rest. Chloe cries as she sees the boy begging his mother to wake up. Later in the evening, Fred addresses a letter in his room for Chloe to find. Chloe finds out and reads to find out from her former teacher that he has appreciated her kindness towards him. He and his mother through all the years they stayed in the Nostal family house. Chloe looks out the window, feeling that it was she who should thank him and her mother. Since they were the only ones who showed her kindness as a maid, she says goodbye to her former master. Fred heads to the city, where he tries to enter the court mages guild. The officer insists that he return 2 years later, when he already received his permanency at the coming-of-age ceremony. But the boy would not take no for an answer. Oven, the guild master, sees the commotion and asks Fred if he knows how to use magic. Flat is insulted that he is being treated like a child, and unleashes the magic spell, which strengthens his punch, and attempts to hit him. Oven creates a barrier that easily deflects the child's attack. He is intrigued by the child, and allows him to participate in the entrance exam. In the arena, Fred performs well in simulated battles. At the end of the matches, Oven raises the child's hand to signal his victory. In the crowd is Malcolm Cohen, who asks his brother Leon, who is the boy. Leon replies that he is a boy of the same age. Malcolm Cohen asks if one day he will be able to be like Fred. Always the loving brother, Leon picks him up and tells him that he will surely be like him one day. Back in the present, Malcolm Cohen searches for Fred in his room and only finds it empty. He sees that his friend left his coat and realizes that he really left. Meanwhile, Fred walks through the busy streets, carrying his bag of belongings. He checks and calculates that he can only live for 6 months in a cheap hostel with the money he has. That makes him realize that he needs to get a job before his 6 months are up. He tells himself that he will find some solution. He worries that, without a skill, he will be rejected from any job he seeks. He reviews that it doesn't matter if you want to be a blacksmith, apothecary, tailor or chef, all those professions require a skill. Wondering what kind of job he can do with his control key skill. Something from behind suddenly pushes him, making him lose his balance. He sees that he is a man who runs fast. Then she realizes that her bag of belongings is missing, and realizes that the man running is a thief who just stole it. He says goodbye to his savings with tears, only to realize that he should not give up. He casts a wind spell that makes him run fast. He goes after the thief, and zigzags through the people to get to him. Despite his speed, the thief keeps smiling, confident that he will not be caught. Fred realizes that, despite his speed, he cannot cut the distance. Looking closely at the thief's legs, he sees that he also has an ability that makes him run faster than him. No matter how hard he tries, he just gets further and further away from the thief. Meanwhile, the thief is smiling because he stole something easily with his skill that transformed his legs into something agile and strong. A man is on the roof watching the thief run. The man on the roof smiles, confident that he will catch the guy. The man jumps off the roof to cut off the thief's path. He tells the thief that he cannot escape from his eyes even with his legs. The thief recognizes him as the adventurer he was escaping from, and pulls out a knife to fight him. He attacks the man, but no matter what he does, the adventurer still evades with ease. Fred is amazed by the adventurer's quick reflexes. As he continues to watch, he realizes that it is not his reflections that are impressive. but that he is moving as if he could see the future. For him, it is like an eagle that is free. The man kicks the thief, causing him to lose his balance. He confirms to Frank that his ability is the eyes that see the future. The adventurer ties up the thief and returns the bag to Frank. The adventurer shows the necklace he recovered from a thief and confirms that, with his client's valuables back, his mission is complete. His mission reminds Fred of the peacekeeping duties he had when he was still in the Court Mages Guild, and he realizes that adventure may be the job for him. He asks the man if he can teach him everything about how to be an adventurer. The man says he would be happy to do it and introduces himself as Jack. He tells her that anyone can be an adventurer because there is no discrimination based on the quality of skill. So even deserters can move up the ladder with brute force. He goes on to explain that some jobs require you to help old ladies carry their things to kill monsters, and that the best part about being an adventurer is that you can choose the requests that suit you. Flat asks about the disadvantages, but the man plays shy and tells him that he will eventually find out. He says he doesn't need to worry about that, as he's just getting started. Jack takes him to the guild and explains that it is the organization that takes care of adventurers. They enter where Jack says he needs to leave it to report on his completed application. Fred shakes her hand, and they part ways. Fred makes his way to the registration desk where he is greeted by a receptionist. Go through the process and sign some papers. He is amazed that anyone can just walk in and register without a lot of questions. The receptionist presents him with his adventurer badge and explains that it is the badge of the lower ranks. Since he is still starting out, he pins it to his chest and says he will do everything possible to get promoted. Someone from the back recognizes Fred and calls him. It turns out to be Grime, who is curious as to why he is in the guild. Grime sees his badge and laughs that this means he was fired from the Court Mage Guild. He sees an opportunity for revenge and prepares his giant sword for battle. Grime points his giant sword at Fred to threaten him even more. He also shows her his adventurer badge. Fred doesn't understand why he's showing it, but the receptionist recognizes his silver line, designed to mean it's a B rank badge. Grime justifies his earlier loss as simply a result of the other members of the Court Mage Guild intervening in his fight. She lunges at Fred, and he dodges at the last minute before the sword touches him. The great enemy asks what he can do now that he is alone. It frustrates Fred that she is right to remember that it was only because of Leon's support that she won against him earlier. He doesn't lose hope as he believes he can still win. He faces his opponent assuming that he will win the fight. Meanwhile, the crowd is watching the fight and is not surprised that Grimes is at one again. At first, Jack ignores what is happening, only to be surprised that Frat is the one who is fighting Grime. The others ask Jack if he is strong, but Jack doesn't believe it as he has just registered as an adventurer before. Grime laughs as the young man can barely evade the attacks of his sword. Fred tries to recite an incantation, but Grime wouldn't let him finish. Fred worries about Grime's reputation as a troublemaker. The crowd gets frustrated that Fred is not attacking, so they yell at him for being a coward. Jack doesn't think it is because he might just not have accepted the challenge from the beginning. He wonders why the young man simply does not use his skill. His friend asks Jack that they can see his eyes on Frank. He replies that he does not have magic at the moment to use all his sighted eyes, and therefore cannot properly observe the young man. The battle continues with Green making a cut that cuts and pushes the wind towards Fred. The young man is hit as if he had just received a strong punch, sending him backwards. Fred sees that he is hurt. Suddenly, he sees a viewport with a notification saying that since he is in danger, he will start his skills tutorial. He doesn't understand, but as he keeps reading, he realizes that he can see Grime's stats, including his skill and swordsmanship. He is reading aloud, which makes Grime wonder how he knows of his ability. A virtual keyboard appears, and an instruction says that you can copy Grime's skill. Press the C key while holding down the Control key. He does, and then the instructions say that he needs to press the 5 key while holding down the Control key to finish copying his skill. Then he is surprised to see in the status window that the sword handling skill was transferred to his skill slot. The young man is happy to know now how his skill works. Meanwhile, Jack asks him why he's acting so strange, but Frank can't answer. The young man then steals Jack's sword from his belt and runs back to the battle. Green is insulted that he thinks he can stand up to him with swordsmanship, and prepares to fight back. Frat makes a sword stroke, and is able to wound the enemy sideways. Frat felt his body moving on its own to execute the sword strike. He is amazed at the power of his skill. Grim is frustrated because he can say that his swordsmanship is a reflection of his own. He wonders if he was kicked out of the Mage Guild because he received a swordsmanship skill. He feels danger emanating from his opponent. He tries not to follow his instinct and goes on the attack. Fred manages to block his punch, but finds the force too heavy. Green explains that it is the weight of his sword techniques that he has built and perfected, and that has become his pride. He yells at the young man, telling him that there is no way someone who has just picked up a sword for the first time can break his pride, and then kicks him. The kick is so powerful that Fred is pushed back. The young man tries to get up, but he feels that he can no longer win. He remembers Malcolm Cohn asking him why he's so strong. She remembers Oven telling her that she should start from scratch. He remembers his mother offering to teach him magic. These memories give him the resolve to get up and finish the fight. He sees a barrel and runs towards it, and then kicks it towards Grime. Grime sees it rolling towards him and cuts it in two, exposing the oil that it contains. Fred throws a lamp into the oil, starting a fire that surrounds Grime. The enemy recognizes the strategy as a means to exhaust his resistance with smoke, while also sealing his movements with a wall of flames. He declares that it is not enough. Fred then enters the flame to confront him. He makes a hit, while Grime is open, leading to the big man losing his giant sword. Fred then sings a fire spell and declares that it is his pride. He slaps her with the spell, causing Grime to fly out with a tornado of flames. Jack is stunned. The crowd goes wild, cheering Fred's victory. Later, Fred apologizes to the receptionist for the mess, but she tells him that, since Graham started it, there is no problem. After which, he runs into Jack, who tells him that he has shown him a good fight. Jack admits that he only saw him as a clueless kid before, and apologizes for it. Fred says he doesn't need to apologize, and tries to return his sword to him. The man says that there is no need, and tells him that it is now his sword. He explains that it is called the sword of the game, and that he got it from his father. He thinks he has finally found the one he can trust with the sword. The young man takes the sword and the two separate. As Frat walks away, Jack can tell that he will be a great magician one day. Frat is in his room, reviewing his skill and discovering that it is the power to copy and make other skills his own. He thinks he should test his skill away from prying eyes. He then notices the map shown on the wall, and realizes that he can test his skill in the mine where he and the Mage Guild faced off. He wants to check the mine and see if the monsters have responded. Later, he goes to the street and asks a horse cart driver to take him to the mine. The driver tells him that he cannot do it because he does not want to approach the place. Realizing that the mine is still feared by people, he convinced Fred even more that it is the perfect place to test his skill. He tells the driver that he understands, and that it would be fine if he dropped him off near the place. Fred gets a ride with him to the outskirts of the city. The driver then stops his car, and insists that he return to the city to the point that he doesn't even want to charge him for the trip. The man then tells her how his best friend was killed by the monsters last month, and that it wouldn't be appropriate for him to send a boy to his doom. Fred realizes how much the man must have been hurt that day. Fred reveals to him that it was one of the court mages guild who arrived that day. And as he remembered that a miner had already fallen before they arrived, he goes on to say that it is also a place of deep importance to him, but that the dangers that remain there are one more reason for me to have to return. Go back there. He begs her to let him go there and assures her that he will come back. The driver takes him to the mine. He asks the young man to be careful in there. Fred enters the cave. On the floor, he comes across a locket with a photo of a girl smiling, and picks it up. The roof suddenly collapses, so he runs to the exit, but the cave catches him. He sings magic to strengthen his punch, but it's not enough to break. He knows that he can only use magic 5 or 6 times, and determines that it is not the time to try again. He realizes that he needs to use his control key. Opens its viewport, and sees that there are new commands. Access the knowledge library to search for information. Press Ctrl and F to search for an exit. The computer is loaded, after which it says that the escape is possible. He suggests that he use the digging ability possessed by a monster in the mine, so he plans to face the monster on his way. explore the cave while scanning its viewport. He notices a button and presses it. He tells her that the button can only be unlocked when her mastery of the skill has reached a certain level. It makes him realize that his ability gets stronger the more he uses it. Suddenly, he hears screeching in the dark. He looks outside and sees countless numbers of monsters known as dark bats. Determined that this is not the monster with a digging ability. A bat is lunging at him, so he dodges it. He thought he had avoided it, but the creature bit his shoulder. She tries to shake him off, but he's holding on. He determines that dark bats have the ability to drain the blood of humans until they die. He manages to get the bat off his back and throws it away. He wants to finish them all quickly, but he knows he can't spend his magic on them. He pulls out his sword and uses his fencing skill to slash at them over and over again. No matter how many I kill, there are still many left. He feels he has no choice but to use magic. Before he can, he realizes from his viewport that there is a command he can use. He presses it and an arrow appears on a lot of the bats. A bat attacks him, so he slashes him with his sword. Instantly, all the bats are cut down as well. Fred is surprised that all the marked enemies have been killed. He determines that as long as he can put marks on his targets, he can wipe them all out. With a single magic spell. He puts marks on each bat, and then unleashes magical fireballs that eliminate them all. Later, Fred finds a group of kobolds. He doesn't mind that everyone seems to want to kill him, and is more focused on how they don't have the digging skill. Instead, he marked them with an arrow. He cut one of them in half, which cut everyone automatically. He remembers how he used fireballs on the bats before, and how just shooting at one bat means automatically shooting 10 fireballs. He realizes that he needs to carefully consider when to use his marking skill. Looking at the kobolds' corpses disturbs him as they seem so human to him. Take the night vision cabal skill, and thus get a clear view in the dark. He embarked further and further into the darkness until he was surprised to see an area with mountains of magic stones. Think of the fortune he can make by taking them all back. Then he notices a magic circle on a wall marked with knives. He calls it a demon seal, and recognizes it as the demon's gateway. That must have been the reason why monsters are so abundant. Take out all the knives, making the magic circle ineffective. Suddenly, the cave shakes again. A giant worm with sharp teeth suddenly digs out of the walls. He recognizes it as the rock-clad worm. He attacks him, so he dodges him. He tries to cut her skin, but it's too hard to scratch. He determines that the enemy is too tough and that he should regroup. Use the kobold's stealth ability to blend in with the darkness. It leaves the worm confused and unable to find its target. He is glad to be temporarily safe, but has no idea how to move forward. He would like to use magic, but he remembers that even his strongest spell could not end through a stone wall. He opens his viewport and sees that it's the monster with the digging ability he's looking for. He copies and pastes the ability and then launches himself at the creature. Activates the digging ability, which transforms his hand into something larger and earth-like. He uses it to hit the worm, which cracks its outer shell. He thinks he has it, but it just makes the worm aggressive. She attacks him, but he responds. He eats it, but his punch creates a hole that becomes his exit. With this movement, the worm curls up and dies. Fred is panting, but he's relieved that it's finally over. He is glad that the digging skill can be used as a weapon, so well as for digging. He also uses it to break the magic stones from the stone walls. She puts them all in a bag and is glad that she will finally be able to buy new clothes and equipment once she arrives in the city. With his digging skill, he punches his way out of the cave until he reaches the entrance. There, he meets the horse driver again. He tells Fred that he came because he was worried about him. Then he notices that Fred is carrying a locket. The young man tells him that he saw him in the mine and that he could not leave him there. The driver remembers that it is his friend's closing and is glad to see him again. He tilts his head and grabs Fred's hand. With tears falling, she humbly thanks Fred for returning it. Fred doesn't know what to say. Later, he gives a huge piece of magic stone to the driver. The young man tells him that what is left is already enough for him, and asks the driver to use his share to finance the reconstruction of the tunnel. He assures her that he has already destroyed the source of the monsters so that they can return to work in the mine again. The driver looks at the locket with tears and says that he will do it in honor of his partner. Fred then tells her that it's time to go back to the city. Accept the previous driver's offer for a free ride. The driver laughs and says he will. Fred tries on his new clothes to venture out, but feels that they are too flashy to fit him properly. The shop owner assures her that it fits her perfectly. This secures him enough to take it. The moment he leaves the store, he instantly regrets it. He walks the streets thinking about the new skills he got from the mine, and how he needs to revise them properly. He is afraid that if he tries his new skill at the inn, he will destroy his room and annoy the inn owner. He decides he needs a place away from prying eyes. Then she notices a trio of children who are in trouble as their money is not enough to buy the flower the girl wants. It reminds him of when he was still a boy about to buy flowers for a girl. Back then, his father reprimanded him for talking to an ordinary girl. He was forced to walk away without saying a word to the girl. He smiles as he realizes he can do better this time. He approaches the children and offers to treat them with the flower. The children are very happy that they got the flower they wanted and thank him for his help. When they leave, Fred hears that they are going to give it to a nun. This tells him that the children are orphans from the Sako Church orphanage. Remember that the Church of Sako is one of the largest religions in the world. He reminds her that there should be an abandoned church on the outskirts of the city. He sees the potential of a spacious and abandoned place away from people's gazes where he can train. Later that night, Fred goes to the abandoned church. He counts the magic stones he has left that he hasn't turned into money. He calculates that he has enough HP to fully restore his depleted magic power once he thoroughly examines his abilities. He opens his status window and sees that his magic ability has increased. He also discovers that he can see a picture of those whose skills he copied. Be thankful that I now have a way to see the numerical value of the skill instead of relying on intuition. Check the number of skills you currently have and see that you still have them all after 24 hours. This confirms to him that he can permanently use the skills he copied. It amazes him that the skill he has for life can easily become 6. The front door slams open, startling Frank. She looks back with a strained disposition, but sees that she is a beautiful young woman. Despite seeing how innocent he looks, Fred doesn't want to let his guard down, just in case it's a trap. He reminds himself that using women and children is a common trap used by thieves, so his hand remains on the hilt of his sword. He sees the necklace with the woman's cross and realizes that it is from Psycho's church. The girl realizes that he is looking at her chest and covers up. In return, the girl sees his hexagram rank badge and is relieved that he is just an adventurer, and not someone she is running away from. He asks her who she is referring to, but the girl looks away and remains silent. He asks her if she is being chased, so the girl gets defensive and asks if he is interrogating her. While they calm down, they sit in one of the pews of the church. Fred introduces himself while she hesitates to do so. The girl finally says that her name is Tina and asks to keep their meeting a secret. Fred is intrigued that she has given her real name as he already found out her name through his status window. He wonders if the girl is just naive or honest to the core. Before the girl can tell him why she's being chased, they hear a voice outside. Fred asks if the people outside are the ones who are chasing her. 3 renegade knights enter with crosses designed on their helmets. They ask Tina to go with them. Tina refuses and says she will not give up until the darkness that is creeping into the church is purged. The gentlemen despise her for her ideals and tell her that the world does not work only with ideals. The leader of the knights orders one of them to bring her with them. The gentleman approaches her and tries to grab her. Before he can, Fred grabs his hand. The gentleman asks what he is doing. He replies that grown men shouldn't attack a girl like this. The knight steps aside, and then draws his sword. This leads Frar to draw his sword in disarm, and then knock out the knight. He tells Tina to stay back, and declares that he will end the fight quickly. A knight flies out, and his companions stare in shock, not expecting the power of the young adventurer. Turning to Frau, they question if he realizes what he's doing. To go against them is to make enemies with the Church of Psycho, the largest organization on the continent. He must have people he cares about, and they will definitely be dragged into the fight. However, all that is irrelevant to the young man, whose eyes are steely and unflinching. After all, he is a homeless man without a home, or a place to work, and now he has nothing left to lose. Moreover, he stopped living his life worrying about appearances, being the son of a noble, a court magician, and only being too restrained to save a girl in trouble. He has given up all that and is now charging to do what he feels is right. An enemy blocks his blow with a sturdy shield, but the force is enough to make his knees wobble. Still, they could not understand what he has to earn, but he emphasizes that none of it matters to him. I was helping the poor girl just because I wanted to. Tina's eyes trembled with surprise, not expecting such loyalty. Fred puts down his sword and breaks the sword. Surrounded by enemies, it was the perfect opportunity to test his skills. When activating the control key, the screens suddenly flash past the gentlemen, showing their statuses. Normally, the activation of the ability consumes mon power every time it is used. He looks at his own state, wanting to see if his intuition and calculations are correct, and smiles and delights in confirming that copying skills does not consume any of his power. It is also the reason why you can copy several at once. An enemy takes advantage of the distraction and jumps in to continue his battle. Looking at him, Fred copies his skill at that moment and uses the foresight skill. The adventurer is able to see his punches and intentions clearly, which allows him to counterattack with the perfect timing. Just like that, the squad leader falls with a huge chest wound. As if mocking him, he says the gentleman's name, saying that he has a very useful skill. This shocks the man who cannot understand why his information was known. Just then, Frank started an incantation to end things immediately. No one can defend himself, while he sends a powerful gust of wind on his way. With everything resolved, he turns to Tina, finally asking her to explain what was happening. First of all, she thanks the young man for saving her, and the two friends of the same age agree on how to address each other. Getting acquainted, she then asks if he is aware of the church, and how he runs the orphanages in the city. Their lives depend on the donations of believers, but she discovered that the priest has already been embezzling that money. After discovering this, he found evidence and tried to take it to the church headquarters. But the priest will not allow that to happen so easily. Things are finally starting to make sense to Fred, but he still doesn't know who she is to them. For a moment, she hesitates, but soon reveals that she is the sacred maiden. Again, things are becoming clearer. There is one of them in every city who serves as a religious official. They possess overwhelming healing abilities and are highly valued by the upper church. In fact, people of her position are known as emissaries of the goddess of healing. Naturally, Jeff wouldn't want his wrongdoings exposed by her. He wonders what he is going to do now, and is told that he is still secretly heading to the headquarters during the night. For the sake of the church, which guides and heals people, news of infighting would cause a commotion. Flat suddenly gets up, saying that they can't afford to take it easy, and have to hurry. If she wants to get to the headquarters before dawn, Tina does not understand why she is helping and willingly getting into such a mess. For him, risk is one more reason to get involved and see things through to the end. It's his job to accept requests as an adventurer, so he encourages her to make one right now. Shocked by his kindness, the troubled maiden can't help but burst into tears, but it steals her resolution and determination. As he suggested, she asks for his help, promising to reward him later. Fred smiles satisfied, and as an adventurer of the guild, officially accepts his request. The two run in the night, hoping to escape in silence and peace. However, this doesn't work very well as some voices suddenly tell him to stop. They were suddenly surrounded. Apart from the ordinary night before, an imposing man approached on horseback carrying a large weapon. Unsurprisingly, the couple will not be allowed to pass so easily. Earlier, still deep in the city streets, Fred asked if there was another way. As they cross the bridge to get to they are essentially asking to be ambushed. There was a longer and safer route, but they would also have to pass through Punto of Control. In other words, they have to pass that way unless I want to swim across the river. He chuckles, understanding that there is no choice but to be surrounded. Now the leader of the knights scolded the holy maiden for going on a spree with a man at night. Tina defends herself, arguing that she was doing no such thing. However, Fred stepped in and stood between them. Since he is not willing to let her go, they have to take him too, even if he is the son of a nobleman. While the girl is surprised, he simply praises her intelligence work, since they even managed to see who he was. In any case, the adventurer refuses to give in, saying that he has accepted a request to escort her safely. Upset by the foolish decision, Carl, the captain, tries to finish things quickly and orders his men to move forward. Fred signals Tina to head to the edge of the bridge. Sandwiched between two charging groups, he fixes his form and intends to defend himself. He hates the fact that gentlemen are belittling others from above. Ready to knock everyone off their pedestal, he starts by using his skill and analyzing everyone's power. For insulting and taking advantage of the maiden, he charges her hand with magic power and swings it to send a gust of wind at her enemies. Seeing his men fly off, Caro can't help but be surprised. As he was informed, the guy reflects the abilities of others and uses them as if they were his own. This time, Fred starts a spell and summons a fireball, but it doesn't stop there. He combines it with a blade of wind, forming a flaming gust of cuts. The powerful spell hits its targets, and one particularly unlucky knight finds himself burning the armor. In a panicked reaction, he becomes agitated and falls over the bridge, plunging into the water below. The adventurer smiles, describing the movement as the blade of scorching wind. He is so pleased with himself that he needs Tina's urgent warning to notice the approaching enemy, raising his sword firm behind the boy. The knight lowered his sword, but was blocked when Fred raised his own weapon. She stares at him, worried that he's showing off, but doesn't notice the man sneaking up on her from behind. They both let their guard down, and now she was about to pay. Their screens cut off with a thud, and the young man, still struggling, looks back to see his enemies retreating. With the girl he swore to protect, he tries to stop them, but the other guards get in his way. Unable to move forward, all he could do was watch as his unconscious body was taken away. Fred cursed the enemies who were taking Tina away. Doing his best, he moves to catch the unsuspecting, allowing the young fighter to counterattack and pierce through the thick armor of a knight. Two others are coming, hoping to stop him and avenge their comrade. Unfortunately for them, he is skilled enough in magic to cast a quick water spell. Their swords collide in the night, but the strange thing is how the guards unexpectedly slipped. The water surrounding the boy was making them fall and miss. Fred takes advantage of the situation and activates his fast copying ability. A concentrated ball of fire appears in his palm, and the remaining enemy is surprised to see his own ability being used against him. A flaming bullet is fired at him, sending him flying backwards. Although shooting forward, the boy's eyes were directed behind him, seething as he looked at Carl, who was watching his men fall. The adventurer sees and takes a shield from the ground. The last enemy charged, his horse neighing and galloping towards the target. By his side, a long, heavy weapon was at the ready. It was a halberd, which is the combination of a spear, an axe and a claw. If Fred faced that head-on while his enemy was on horseback, his defeat would be certain. Surprisingly, he stood his ground and raised the shield, apparently hiding his body behind it. Carl is annoyed by her brazenness and pushes his sword forward, while the shield is smashed to pieces, and Starry was nowhere to be found. He looked around not knowing what had happened and where the boy had hidden. Just then, Fred appeared at his side, holding his sword tightly. It swings just before the man can react, and a helmet goes flying through the air. Almost pouncing on him, the two are forced down to the pavement. He immobilizes him and places his sword next to the man's unprotected head and neck. There was no need to be tougher than this as long as he explains where his boss and Tina are. At first, Carl cursed him, hating the simple adventurer for being full of himself. Fred reluctantly pressed the sword harder, and to the man's surprise, he begged desperately as his time was running out. He remained impassive when he heard the request. Suddenly, a knight appeared from behind, raising his sword to catch the boy off guard. He was also about to succeed if he had not been stopped by his leader. It was confusing, but the orders were absolute, and he is told to sheathe his sword for now. The situation calms down, and Fred is praised for fearlessly taking on the cavalry, but no. He doesn't have time for that. They tell him that Tina and Jeff are at the nearby cathedral, deducing that he must have a background to the situation. Caro asks what he knows. He does not know all the details, except that the Holy Maiden has proof of the priest's embezzlement. Since he already has the main idea, the captain lets him drink a mana potion, and explains that the church is rushing, because there is a regular meeting tomorrow at the headquarters. Even if Tina is the Holy Maiden, she is still a child, and employing white knights to capture her is overkill. This revelation surprises Frau, who does not know the group he is talking about. They are made up of 20 people, carefully selected for their skill and combativeness. Most of the embezzled money is going to them, and they are probably guarding the cathedral as we speak. That said, the captain knows that he is worried about nothing, since the guy barely used his skill to defeat his men. In reality, there are limitations to the ability to control and copy. So far, he has copied 10 skills, and it seems to be the maximum for his level. Then Fred notices how Caro suddenly became cooperative. Even the gentleman wonders why. More importantly, he urges you to get on the road, and not waste any more time. He even lends the guy his coursel, saying that he is fast enough to get him to his destination on time. With that, Fred rode off into the night, leaving the captain and heading to save Tina from the clutches of evil. Having lent his speed horse, the captain asks Fred to take care of him, since he is his beloved coursel that was carefully bred. The young man promises to do so, saying that he owes her one. He then tells them to stay put as he is going to call the military police to support them. With solemn eyes, the gentleman thinks about someone and asks the boy to save him. Deep in the night, a deep voice echoed inside the cathedral. Jeff is standing over the maid, saying that she was finally captured and calling the slut. Despite her situation, Tina's eyes do not waver, and she despises the evil priest. He orders her to return what he stole from her, but she completely refuses to do so, even questioning how she could act in such an egregious way. Frowning at the stubborn girl, he says that he has no choice but to use his skill. She pulled away helplessly, knowing what was going to happen next. However, he is interrupted by a loud knock on the door. The noise alerts them of an intruder, but the priest still had no idea what was happening. Just then, Fred breaks into the cathedral, arriving just in time to save the maiden. The two call out to each other, and the young man stands his ground, telling Jeff to return Tina. Saying that they are in the middle of a sacred ritual, the man of faith refuses to do so and snaps his fingers. As soon as he told the boy to leave, several gentlemen came in. They are the 21 Knights of the White Dove, all ready to obey their master's orders. Preparing for the impending battle, Fred activates his ability and pulls out a blue stone from his bag. Closing his eyes in concentration, he utters an incantation, making the object glow. It absorbs the inner magic and replenishes its reserves. With this, his mana was full again, and he was ready to fight. It will take at least 15 minutes for the military police to arrive, and you have to hold on until then. If he uses magic until then, he will surely run out before they arrive, so he has to rely on the abilities that are much more efficient. It's only been a while since he got his power, but there was no time to hesitate. Using his control key, he goes through his skill list, and summons the fire bullet, which he copied from the bridge. The young man throws it at the knights, and consumes them in a burning flame. However, it does not work as effectively, since they are all equipped with sturdy shields. Unsurprisingly, they are tougher than the average gentleman. Since that's the case, he wraps his hand with the digging skill. He swings his empowered hands around, and now breaks through the enemy's defenses. With this, at least it confirms that physical attacks are effective. However, the smile quickly disappears from his face at the sight of the men standing up despite their injuries. There was no humanity or life force in them, and they moved like puppets. In other words, they were monsters made to attack. Tina wonders what she's supposed to do, and blames herself for putting him in this situation. Desperate, she prays to the goddess Amadeus, but the priest tells her that the Almighty is too far away for someone in true despair. For someone so high up, the voices of the small and weak will not come. The Holy Maiden cannot believe that a priest is even saying such a blasphemous thing. She believes in her goddess and in Frag, who promised to save her. That young adventurer will surely untie the ropes that bind his limbs. In a picturesque house, some light voices express their gratitude for food. The kids run around as soon as they finish their meal. And even though Tina tells them to clean up before playing, they disappear before she can even make a point. The sound of dishes, utensils, and running water echoed throughout the small house. Home. With a warm smile, an older nun says that she does not have to help with such tasks now that she is the village's sacred maiden. Intending to show her filial piety, Tina rolls up her arms. After all, the senior nun is not as young as she used to be. The two joke around, but the atmosphere turns serious after a while, as they notice the recent decrease in food. For the past 2 months, the church has been sending less funds to the orphanage. The news further surprises the maiden when she is told that multiple requests have been sent despite donations from believers. Wondering where the money could go, he shakes his head in disbelief, denying the idea that the church could be stealing. It's not enough for the young sister, so she decides to get to the bottom of the matter herself. Deep into the night, she sneaked into the church alone and scoured the rooms to find documents and transactions for financing. The time that less food began to arrive coincides with when the Knights of the White Dove were formed. After a while of poking around, he finally finds the documents that prove his suspicions. Jeff burst into the room suddenly and demanded to know who was there spying. Tina managed to hide under the furniture, but she couldn't cover her tracks enough. Her veil had fallen to the ground and had her name embroidered on the fabric. The priest's eyes flashed red as his anger for her bubbled up. She was now kneeling and bound in front of him, as Frat desperately fought to save her. The maid argues that the money was intended to feed the orphans and questions what she achieved by using it to expand the knights. The squad he funded was now rounding up just one guy and trying to take him down in huge numbers. Again, she asks if this is the reason she stole donations. With a pained face, he denies and tries to explain, but his eyes suddenly flashed red once again, filling him with overwhelming anger. Finally seen in person, Tina realizes that the priest was suffering from his own power. She calls Fred and announces that Jeff was being possessed by an evil spirit that is brought by the divine revelation ability. Enraged by his unnecessary words, he beats the maiden to silence her. This provokes the young man, and he rushes to do something about it. With his skill, he investigates the disclosure of details. It is an ability that temporarily invokes spirits to save people who are suffering, but it will fail if used for personal desires. The last condition makes him think that, if used for the wrong purpose, the ability will summon evil spirits. Now that it is much clearer, it is also more difficult, since he has no skills to deal with spirits. Besides, the gentlemen chasing him are a bigger problem. One strikes with his sword, and Fred barely blocks with his rock fist in time. This saves him for now, but his status window beeped urgently, sending alerts that his mana has dropped to the minimum. With that, the adventurer cannot defend himself from the next attack and flies off. He grimaced in pain, and Tina's blurred vision barely sees him flying out. Helplessly, he watches as the Dove Knight raises his sword to end the boy's life. The maid screams and tries to wake him up, but he remains on the ground helpless. Fred opened his eyes, but he was too weak to do anything against the approaching sword. Just then, a familiar halberd appeared, arriving just in time to block the sword's path and save his life. The captain of the knights was there. Koro says he was wrong to believe that a child could handle it alone. The young adventurer is surprised and asks what he was doing there. They tell him not to misunderstand, as the man did not come there to save him. Instead, he was there to fix things with the problem he turned a blind eye to. Tears welled up in Tina's eyes, relieved that her friend is safe. However, an additional enemy doesn't matter to Jeff, who simply tells his knights to kill them both. The Paloma knights regroup, and Fred tries to replenish his mana with an item while Carla stands guard. Regardless of who emerged victorious, the battle was about to end. Dropping the magic stone, he charged with his bulldozer arms. When an enemy sees him worried, he attacks with a surprise attack, but the boy manages to block the sword and defend himself in time. Fred continues his assault and cuts through the entire group. Many of them fall to the blows, but their breathing soon becomes irregular and heavy, exhausted by the seemingly endless struggle. For now, he draws his sword to keep what mana he has left. Resorting to fencing, he swings his weapon and manages to knock some down. As the protracted battle was coming to an end, the captain finally joined in to provide support. He raises his halberd high and throws a wind blade, sending the pigeon knights flying through the air with a whirlwind. Fred watched in amazement, seeing how skills can rise with mastery. There is no need to deal with enemies one by one, and the real power of his abilities lies in taking down entire groups. Just then, those who were sent to spin began to get up as before, moving like puppets under control. Carl agrees with the young adventurer's words and points out how he merged his skill with the fireball spell from before. They tell him to use it again. Fred refuses, saying that he simply doesn't have enough magic power left. It consumes about half of its power and costs 25 MP for a single use. To the boy's disappointment, he is called useless when it matters most. In this case, they have no choice but to trust Tina, the holy maiden who specializes in healing. The captain charged first this time, aiming to make an opening. Frar takes this opportunity to cross the crowd and approach the young woman, to receive her healing purifying light. Mind and body, it is a light that completely heals all fatigue and wounds. That is the skill that made her the holy maiden of the village. He calls her, asking to be purified and restored of his magical power. Jeff frowns as he realizes his intentions. Since this is the only way to overcome the current situation, Tina immediately accepts. The priest tries to stop them, but Fred gets between them, buying time. So far, she has no idea what happened to him in the past or what made him betray his faith. Regardless, she believes her prayers will be answered. It might be too idealistic for her, but she's still going to say it because it's beautiful to believe in miracles. With this, she prays as the holy maiden, and as a human being, hoping to reach her God, even with a small voice. His body shone with a golden light, asking his Lord to answer his plea and save his people. As she does this, Jeff's body shakes, and the whites of his eyes are visible. In addition to her body being affected by the golden light, Frat's magical power is also restored by her power. He is too shocked by what was happening to the priest that she has to remind him to take care of the knights. Coming out of her trance, she begins her enchantment and covers her arm with fire. Carol sees him approaching and is relieved that he is finally there to help. With his work done, he jumps down to take cover from the impending explosion. Fred fuses his skills and throws a blade of scorching wind. The red in Jack's eyes disappears and his pupils return to normal from the purification. He hears a familiar voice telling him to take care of the gentleman. 4 months ago in his small town, a girl named Celine ran up to him with something to show, even calling him uncle. He corrects her, saying that he is a priest, not her uncle, but that does not matter to the girl who is worried, and carries an injured cat. Seeing how bad he is, he agrees to treat the feline immediately. A little later, the girl returned, and running next to her was the cat that had perfectly recovered. Again ignoring her insistence on addressing him as a priest, Jeff thanks her with a bright and warm smile that he can't help but reciprocate. Her new pet runs away, and she says goodbye to him to chase her. At that moment, Koro also appears with a report and tells the priest that they are short-staffed for the patrol. Glancing through the documents for now, he spends a few moments thinking and decides to move the suburban squad to the city. They warn him that monsters appeared in the forest before, but he reasons that that incident was years ago. For now, he wants to concentrate on patrolling the city, not knowing that Celine was deep in the forest. He called the cat with a loud voice, hearing some movements of the nearby trees and bushes. The girl explored further inside. However, what he found was not a cute cat, but a ferocious wolf monster that growled at him. Terror dawned on her, and the piercing screams of the poor girl echoed throughout the forest. A storm roared, and lightning crackled in the night sky. Jad was in his office, essentially passed out from drinking too much alcohol. Soft calls came to his door, but the priest completely ignored him. Carl called in a soft voice. The venue responded to her letter, saying they are unable to provide funds for additional nights. Meeting only silence, the captain assures her that Selim's death was not his fault, but an unfortunate accident. He excuses himself, but already finally spoke, saying that it was his decision that led to his death. For him, he abandoned the poor girl. In his mind, he killed the girl who trusted him. Through tears, he swears to apologize to her one last time, despite knowing that an apology won't be enough for what he did. Driven by his powerful desires, an evil spirit showed himself for the first time, saying that he has access to money. Turning in surprise, he sees his evil reflection in the mirror. He presents himself as his ally, and the only one who really understands him. He argues that the money is off limits and is meant to be used for children. However, this is precisely the reason why you should use it, and make sure that they are safe from all evil. From that moment, the priest's mind began to be filled with delusions, and justified his decision to create an order of knights that would carry out his will. Opening his eyes in the cathedral, he sees Fred standing on that very order. Jeff grimaced and held his head, saying that the being that was corrupting her was gone. Despite being released, he called whoever was there again. New, still having something to ask. The three tried to stop him, but it was too late, and the man was already walking towards the altar, begging for a way to be saved. His eyes were filled with despair as he released the divine revelation, right after being freed from its clutches. As he kept begging for help, an unknown flash of light appeared. Instead of an evil spirit, something else, something more divine was there. A faint, warm voice spoke up, calling Jeff uncle, and saying everything was fine. Celine's spirit smiled reassuringly at her, promising to return. To meet again someday. Accompanied by her cat and a guiding angel, the girl vanished as quickly as she was summoned. Just then, the military police arrived on the scene, ordering him to surrender to them. To the leader's surprise, the situation was already resolved, and the Paloma Knights had already been defeated. Flat sighs, wishing they had arrived a little earlier. With this, Jeff's hands are tied, and he is escorted to prison. The young people watch as he is dragged away, but Tina can't help it, sure that her God will revive his soul and guide him on the right path. She tells him to acknowledge his sins, to spy, and to make sure he comes back. After all, he is none other than the beloved priest of his people. With the moonlight shining on him, he feels that he can finally walk without a big weight on his shoulders. Jack leaves with the police, ending the life. Everything once and for all. Tina was handed over to the military police as a witness along with the documented evidence. Fred wants to accompany her, but given how exhausted he was, it was better to be with the police. Fortunately, they promised to make the Holy Maiden's safety a top priority. It is quite different from what they planned, but the adventurer's work there was done. She thanks him from the bottom of her heart for now, and assures that she will adequately compensate for his services later on. The two young men separate, and Frat's first mission is completed. The next morning, a street vendor sold newspapers advertising a big report. People rushed and crowded to get their hands on the newspaper, and even Freddy to force his way through the dense group. Fortunately, he manages to get what he needs. Sighing as he leaves the noisy crowd, he checks the news, and sees a report about a local priest embroiled in a huge corruption scandal. The crime mentioned was mere embezzlement, which means that the battle of the previous night was kept secret. The knights involved were safe in the hospital, but have apparently lost their memories of joining the Paloma Knights. Meanwhile, the squadron was supposed to be reorganized, with Koro appointed as its leader. Frank was walking around with the newspaper, still trying to make sense of the things that had happened. What he saw at the altar back then was still a mystery, but he is sure that they were saved by something bigger than normal. At least, that's what he wants to believe. Anyway, it was time to get back on the road, and find a much easier request to fulfill. Upon entering the guild, he is greeted by the receptionist, who was cheerfully greeting him to get his attention. He greets her with a good morning with a confused expression, and is told to accompany her. After a while of covering his eyes, the young man is told to look in front of him. To his surprise, he sees an adventurer badge of rank in a bag containing 100,000 coins. The amount makes him stagger backwards, believing that it is too much. Seeing him decline, the employee tells him not to play dumb, as she is already well informed. The headquarters gave them a report detailing their fierce battle to protect the maiden from the enemies. As a reward for his great achievement, he has been promoted to the rank of. Having said that, he gladly accepts, leaving all hesitation behind. However, it doesn't end there, and she asks him to accompany her inside. To his surprise, he finds Tina hiding in the room, so he wonders what the hell she was doing there. Privately, she keeps talking about realizing how inexperienced she was in the real world. For this reason, the girl wants to venture out and train to make proper use of it for others. She gets shy after saying this and asks if it's okay for her to join him on his adventures. Fred thinks about it for a while and says that he feels that it was he who was saved by her. Ever since he was kicked out of his job, he's been wondering what it meant to have comrades. Fighting with her and Caro helped him find the answer he was looking for. Without any reason to refuse her, she reaches out her hand and accepts the proposal. The two shake hands to end their partnership and look forward to working and counting on each other from then on. His moment is interrupted when other adventurers rave about a mission to kill a divine beast. Although their partnership had barely begun, a big job was already waiting for them on the board. They move past the crowd, pushing and splitting to see what all the fuss was about. Fred apologizes for getting too close to the maiden in the process, but his eyes were set on the request to kill a divine beast. Apparently, a dragon was attacking nearby villages and had already elevated some of them to baronies. What's more, the reward was a whopping 500,000 coins. The amount makes the young man's previous reward seem small, even though that is not the case at all. Pulling himself together after noticing Tina's reaction, he then turns to the receptionist and cautiously asks about the subjugation mission of the dragon. A dragon roared over a burning village, causing its citizens to scream in absolute terror. With a magic circle around his neck, he watched as its flames consumed the buildings and continued to breathe fire. Regardless of the fire that was already happening, the locals ran for their lives, even leaving their belongings behind. A couple of men are forced to stop the mayor from running towards his house, wondering if he can't see that he was already burning to ashes. He orders them to let him go and explains that his grandson is still inside. With tears running down her face and despair in her voice, she calls Bella repeatedly, begging that the child is okay. Back at the guild, Fred was asking the receptionist for details about the mission. Divine beasts, legendary creatures transmitted through tales and legends such as the phoenix. While it's general knowledge to some, very few have seen one in person. In ancient times, such beings ruled the world, but they have greatly decreased in number, eventually handing over leadership to humans. Based on the subjugation request, it means that a legendary creature had actually appeared. It's definitely hard to believe at first, but a dragon has incited in an area east of the capital. And 30% of the land has been lost. Fred grimaced, still unable to believe the farce. Noticing Tina's silence, he turns to the young maiden and asks her if she is interested in accepting the mission. More than wanting to do it, he says he's curious about the whole thing. They are talking about intelligent beings referred to as gods, and they should not harm people unintentionally. As the lady says, the divine beasts rule the powers of nature and act from a neutral point of view. If they are harming people as the report says in the application, then it is likely that the villagers have angered him in one way or another. That said, you won't really know until you ask the locals. Seeing Tina's obviously perturbed expression, Fred smiles as he makes a decision and rips the application off the guild bulletin board. He announces that he is going to accept it, and the receptionist is surprised that he intends to take it with only 2 people and a group. It is truly a daunting task, but the other option is to leave the village and accept a request for herb harvesting. What's more, the holy maiden probably wants to save both the villagers and the divine beast. Surprised, she asks if she also has a hidden mind-reading skill, but is told that she is easy to read. A statement she has heard even from the orphanage. If there really is a reason for the dragon's anger, then subjugation might not be the only way to deal with it. Promising to do what they can, the adventurer and the maiden team up on their first mission together. Since it seems useless to try to stop them, the receptionist decides to be supportive and arranges a carriage for them immediately. They plan the trip there, which will probably make them pass through several villages along the way. It will take about 3 days in total. And since they are dealing with a real dragon, the two are advised to prepare thoroughly before departing. Tearing out the notes and handing them to the adventurers, the guild staff wishes you luck and success. Starting her journey, Tina sat under the shade of her carriage and studied her adventurer badge with a proud smile. On the other hand, Fred was right in front of her, completely asleep from the long journey. She calls him with an expressionless face, saying that they are about to reach their destination. The young man blinks and opens his eyes, even lazily stretching his limbs after satisfactory sleep. After 3 days of rocking, resting in such conditions was no longer a problem. Traveling on foot for now, Tina is forced to witness the wonders of nature, including how a chameleon would eat a beautiful butterfly. She rushes to Frank, who says that these are all animals that one would not see in the city. It was really an amazing and exciting sight to behold, but since their purpose this time was not sightseeing, they had to hurry up and go to work. Passing through one last group of animals, they finally arrived at Villa Gold, which seemed to be in the middle of reconstruction. A girl notices them first and wonders who the strangers are, making friends first of all. Tina compliments the pretty dress she's wearing. The girl says that the mayor of the village made it for her, and points to the man behind them who was slowly approaching. He shows a kind smile and laughs, while saying that they have been waiting for the adventurers. Introducing himself as Joseph, he thanks them both for coming to his field. While they must be exhausted from the long journey, he can't offer much, and only tells them that his family has been wool crafters for generations, so his hobby is making children's clothes. While walking, Fred sees a charred and wrecked building nearby. When asking what it is, the old man suddenly adopted a serious expression. He shares how the dragon visited his village twice. The first time, the fields were razed to the ground, and the second, left them with houses turned into ashes. There were no casualties except for his grandson who lived in that barn. He and Billy did not get along very well, as the old man objected to his decision to leave the city. After that, the boy locked himself in the barn and locked the door. No matter how many times he screamed during the fire, the child would not come out of hiding. Unable to take it anymore, the villagers pool their money to ask the adventurers for help. It's not necessarily to avenge his grandson. After all, grudges beget grudges, and there is no need to kill a beast that bears the title of a god. With this, Fred understands that the most important goal then would be the safety of the villagers. He also believes that they did nothing to incur the dragon's wrath, and wonders what happened. It may not be useful information, but Joseph points in one direction, saying that the dragon headed towards the mountains and the forest. After burning down their village, they thank him, assuring that it is probably the most useful thing he can do. Although they move with confidence, the two wonder how they are supposed to climb such a high and big mountain. Frat suggests using his abilities to jump or dig up the dirt, earning a skeptical response from Tina. However, he is as serious as possible, but she insists that he stop joking so much. Just then, they passed by another group that was deciding to take a break. The maid listens to the man, saying that it is a blessing that Belly died from all the villagers. If they lost more hard-working people, then the village would remain a wasteland forever. Fred noticed Tina turning around, but it was too late to stop her from doing something. She called Crass, the degrading but great man, and says that there is no person whose life does not matter. They looked at her indignantly, wondering who the strange woman was. Fred tries to hold her down, anxious to keep things from escalating further. She breaks free from his grip, ready to fight for what she believes in, when a large shadow suddenly looms over their bodies. To his surprise, the dragon was flying high, apparently having come to wreak havoc for the third time. Fred looked up at the sky in shock, unable to believe that there really was a dragon there. The beast suddenly spun around, doing a forward somersault, and using its tail to destroy the buildings around it. For some reason, Crass blames the adventurers for triggering his attack, but Tina simply tells them to evacuate to somewhere safe. He argues that he cannot leave. Just after seeing her house destroyed, With a firmer voice, the maiden kindly asked her to escape. His tone surprises the arrogant man, and the two adventurers waste no time in getting to work. They reach the mayor, who is telling the villagers to ensure the safety of the children. Meanwhile, those who can fight were already drawing and aiming arrows. The projectiles fired and accelerated forward, but bounced uselessly off the thick scales of the dragon. It's no use, and his attacks weren't doing any harm at all. On the other hand, it actually seemed to infuriate the beast, which was now preparing to retaliate. Things got worse, and he threw a rain of rocks and stones at the people below. Joseph falls to the ground after being hit in the head. Knowing that things need to be stopped, Fred asks Tina to take care of the mare, while he takes care of the beast. On horseback, he first tries to get her attention and take her away from the village. Casting a fire spell, the young man shoots at the target, but barely scratches it, just like everything else they threw. Fortunately, this works to capture their aggression. Things go as planned, and the dragon flies towards the adventurer who fled the city and went into the forest where there were fewer people. Nearby animals ran as their home was terrorized. Meanwhile, Fred was wondering what to do from that moment on. Resorting to his only option, he activates his ability and is told that it has been improved after reaching a certain level. In other words, he leveled up the battle with the Dove Knights. The system explains how the skill limit has increased along with the details you can see. Explanations rained down, but he told her to shut up as the situation was urgent. The dragon continued to charge, destroying the trees. Suddenly, he spoke, telling the boy to run as he couldn't contain himself anymore. Seeing that he kept crashing all over the forest, Franz stubbornly kept watching his state, even more intrigued after hearing his voice. Her name was Lucia, and under her name was the explanation of why she was causing havoc. He applied meek, which is also because there was a magic necklace around his neck. Tina arrived at that moment asking if her partner was still okay. More importantly, he is concerned about Joseph's condition. Hearing that he is fine, Fred explains that the dragon is being controlled by someone. His status showing that he has been tamed confirms his suspicion that the beast is being controlled by a malicious person, robbing him of his free will. That said, his next goal is not to subjugate the dragon, but to capture the master tamer, who was bending him to his will. The tamer is probably in the Rocky Mountains, where the road is too rough for horses to cross. Looking at a huge eagle perched on a tree, he says that the ground is not the only option. Seeing that she pulls a rope out of her bag and takes command, Tina can't help but put on an exasperated look. He spins the rope and links the unsuspecting bird, which squealed when it found its neck tied. Using the rider's skill, Fred mounted the creature. The maid still could not believe what she was doing, and he even tries to refuse when he tells her to join him at the top of the eagle. Unfortunately, he doesn't have much to say about it as usual, and he rides it this or not ready. Holding on tight, they fly into the sky and head to the Rocky Mountains with the goal of saving the dragon. Deep in the Rocky Mountains, a lonely man was laughing with delight as he looked at the remains left by the dragon. Smile Crashy's house, which was completely destroyed by the attack. However, his face soon showed a frown as he saw Joseph, still safe, and standing despite everything. Aiming at him, then forces the dragon to attack once more. With tears in his eyes, Ludi sent stones flying towards him. He falls to the ground after receiving a blow, and the man looks at them smugly, apparently taking revenge on everyone who made fun of him. Just then, he sees Fred defending himself, and is furious that someone has the audacity to stand in his way. Irritated, he orders the dragon to chase the boy and kill him, which is how they ended up in the forest. Later, the adventurous couple arrives at the foot of the mountain, and the young man finishes drawing a magic circle for a compressed explosive on the ground. When the magic power flows through it, it should expand and activate. He does as explained, and gently pulls Tina back to safety. The circle doubled and buzzed with power. She was fascinated, and sneaked up on him, but is warned not to touch him, as she set him up to be sensitive to the dragon's pressure. The lines are connected, and the plan is to defeat the dragon with an explosion from the rocks. She hesitates, feeling that it is too terrible an approach. Joseph said there was no need to kill the beast, but based on what they witnessed before, they will be completely overpowered if they don't finish things when given the chance. Using explosives is their last resort, so they should do everything they can to avoid it coming to that. While agreeing to the plan, they hear a loud noise from above, prompting the couple to hurry and move. The man from earlier shouted in anger and frustration. Forgetting that he was venting his anger at a dragon, he kicks the creature's hard scales and grimaces, as he almost breaks his foot from the impact. Summoning his tamer whip, he asks why he let the adventurer escape. He hit her it was in the face, and the divine beast's body suddenly began to shake and tremble. As purple chains of magic tightened around him, a loud roar came out of his mouth, and he suddenly started to shrink in size. After a while, the dragon transforms and takes the humanoid form of a woman. Lucia frowned at him, refusing to obey anyone, especially a man like him. Enraged by her insolence, he looked at her restrained and bound body. A sinister and ghastly expression spreads across her face, and she tugs on her chains, saying that she should be the one a little more inclined to listen. She makes a disgusted face. Closing her eyes, she calls and begs for someone to help her. Just then, they both turn their heads and see Fred coming into the area and kicking the tamer with the eagle he was riding. Fred orders the tamer to get away from the dragon and sends him tumbling across the ground with a powerful kick. He and Tina urgently look around for the huge divine beast, but are confused as they couldn't see anything of that size nearby. Sure he heard her voice a moment ago, he fixes his eyes on Lucia, who had her face turned away. For now, she checks her condition, and is surprised to see incredible levels of vitality under her status window. Taking a closer look, he reads her name and notices something familiar. Finally, she realizes that she is the dragon that is wreaking havoc in the city, but now she is completely tied up without control. The tamer gets up and recognizes the adventurer from earlier. Knowing he must act fast, he runs to the crystal ball tool he uses for taming. Activating his power, he pours magic into it and orders his subject to devour the boy. Just then, Leisha's body twisted, forced to launch self-regeneration. Frat holds his body, trying to figure out what was suddenly happening. Just then, he sees the wounds and scars on his chest disappear. He realizes that they are healing, but she tells him to get away as quickly as possible. His body transformed again, now turning back into the divine beast. The dragon roared, completely losing control over herself again. Returning, Fred identifies the crystal ball as the source of the tamer's power. Using Grimes' sword skills, he launched himself with impressive swiftness. With his sword ready, he aims at the enemy's orb and pierces it to break it at that instant. The man collapses and curses at the boy, but he is still not completely defeated. In this case, he pulls the chain that binds the dragon and rises into the air with the divine beast. He was challenging the adventurer to an aerial battle, and Fred is not one to back down, having also prepared the explosives for this reason. With the eagle, he will attract the couple to that place, and make Tina use her purifying skill on them. The two takers and their beast take flight. With his skill, the boy sees that the man was actually Billy, the mayor's grandson, with whom he did not get along. They thought he died in the stable, but there was the brain of everything. Fred calls him, revealing that he has discovered his identity. He is silent for a moment, but anger bubbles up at hearing his grandfather's name, so he orders Lucia to send him a fire tornado. The swift eagle manages to maneuver and close the gap between them. Still wanting answers, Fred questions his intentions, even saying he agrees that Joseph was with his loss. However, this only serves to infuriate Billy more, as he believes that they are all nonsense, meant to make fun of him like everyone else. The two beasts are forced to separate once more, and the tamer says that he knows nothing about what happened, saying that he will show him his talent. A dangerous look spreads across her face, and Lucia has to tell Frag to run away while she can. However, there was no time, and large rocks soon began to revolve around the dragon, as he used his powers as nature's guardian. He shoots the huge stones at the boy and his eagle. They do their best to dodge and hold on, but there are too many coming at them at once. A rock came towards them, and they could not do anything when it hit the eagle's wing. They collapsed to the ground helplessly,